Imagine inheriting Europe's grandest palace, only to discover it comes with interest payments that devour fortunes daily, while tax authorities circle like predators demanding their share. This nightmare became Princess Gloria's reality when widowhood transformed her from carefree rebel to crisis manager, facing the largest aristocratic debt catastrophe in modern European history. The princess, who'd spent the 80s throwing million-dollar parties, would spend the 90s conducting the greatest noble liquidation since the French Revolution, auctioning centuries of accumulation to save what remained. Her story proves that sometimes preserving a legacy requires destroying it first, that survival demands sacrificing the past to secure any future at all. In this episode of Old Money Allure, we expose how Scandal's favourite princess became aristocracy's most unlikely saviour through the systematic sale of everything her ancestors held sacred. Princess Gloria von Thurn und taxes watched dirt fall on her husband's coffin, December 14, 1990, while creditors calculated interest accumulating at $130,000 per day on debts that would transform her from party princess to crisis manager. The punk princess, famous for neon pink hair and combat boots with evening gowns, had just inherited Europe's largest inhabited palace. 500 rooms across 300,000 square feet of Bavarian grandeur that cost $3 million annually just to maintain. Along with St. Emmeram Palace came 80,000 acres of forest, 25 castles scattered like medieval chess pieces across Germany, priceless art collections spanning 5 centuries, and debts totaling $500 million from catastrophic real estate speculation. Prince Johannes's death, after 2 failed heart transplants within 7 weeks, not 48 hours as often misreported, left his 30-year-old widow facing financial catastrophe worth $1.24 billion in today's currency, making it one of the largest aristocratic debt crises in modern European history. German inheritance law allowed only 9 months to pay estate taxes of $50 million, a deadline that would force liquidation at the worst possible moment in depressed 1991 real estate markets, where buyers smelled desperation. Every month, $4 million vanished in interest payments alone, while St. Emmeram demanded another $3 million annually, just for heat, electricity, and basic maintenance of its Romanesque foundations, Gothic cloisters, Baroque staterooms, and Rococo ballroom. Forbes had once ranked Prince Johannes among Europe's wealthiest aristocrats, with assets exceeding $2 billion, before Harvard-educated advisors convinced him to leverage the family fortune into North American commercial real estate at the peak of the 1980s bubble. The Thurn und Taxis dynasty traced its wealth to 1490, when ancestors secured Europe's first postal monopoly from the Holy Roman Emperor. 5 centuries of accumulation from mail delivery, now threatened by modern financial engineering and speculative excess. 27 luxury automobiles sat in palace garages, while servants wondered about next month's wages, the infrastructure of aristocracy suddenly unsustainable without liquid capital to pay for drivers, mechanics, and the gasoline to fuel them. Princess Gloria's 3 children, Maria Theresia, aged 10, Elizabeth 8, and Prince Albert 7, played in rooms filled with old master paintings and medieval tapestries their mother might have to auction to satisfy German tax authorities. The Carriage Museum held 29 historic coaches, including vehicles used by Emperor Franz Joseph and Ludwig II of Bavaria, each worth millions to collectors, but generating 0 revenue while requiring constant conservation. The family's first Thurn und Taxis bank carried bad loans linked to the real estate ventures. Timber operations bore mortgages against future harvests. Breweries established in 1812 needed modernization. Every asset Johannes touched had become a liability. Society photographers who once documented her outrageous parties, where Andy Warhol painted and Mick Jagger performed, now wondered if the woman Vanity Fair, called Princess TNT, the dynamite socialite, could defuse this financial explosion. Within days of the funeral, Gloria would fire 4 of 5 financial advisors, recognizing their Harvard credentials, and McKinsey pedigrees had helped create disaster. rather than stewarding centuries of accumulated wealth. Private jets vanished first in the liquidation hierarchy, then excess staff, then the pretense that aristocratic life could continue while hemorrhaging millions monthly to service debt that exceeded many national budgets. Tax authorities prepared liens against every castle, creditors filed claims in multiple jurisdictions, and auctioneers from Sotheby's and Christie's sharpened pencils for what promised to be Europe's greatest aristocratic liquidation since the French Revolution. Aristocratic empires crumbling under the weight of debt, scandal, and spectacularly bad judgment. Gloria's crisis was dramatic. But she's not the only heiress we've profiled who woke up to find centuries of wealth evaporating. The story's too scandalous for YouTube, live free on our Substack in the first link in the video description. Plus, we're starting a monthly book club dedicated to old money dynasties that imploded in spectacular fashion. With that said, the palace crypt where Johannes lay contained 28 other family members dating back centuries. Silent witnesses to potential dynasty extinction if Gloria failed to restructure debt and satisfy authorities. Bank vaults held worthless securities from Toronto office towers and Vancouver shopping centres, paper monuments to speculation that had devoured tangible heritage built over 500 years. But Gloria von Schönberg-Glauchau hadn't survived poverty to surrender to it again. The former beer hall waitress, who'd married into millions, would soon transform into a financial warrior defending her children's birthright. Europe changed forever in 1490 when Franz von Taxis convinced Holy Roman Emperor Frederick III to grant his family exclusive rights over continental mail delivery, creating the world's first international communications network. The innovation was revolutionary. Relay stations positioned every 12 to 15 kilometres, fresh horses constantly ready, professional messengers who could transport letters from Brussels to Innsbruck in under 7 days, rather than the 3 weeks required by traditional methods. Emperor Maximilian I codified and expanded the monopoly in 1516, making the Taxis family, later Germanized to Thurn und Taxis, hereditary imperial postal providers across his vast domains spanning modern Germany, Austria, Spain and the Low Countries. 20,000 employees eventually operated the network at its peak, introducing standardized postal rates that made mail accessible to merchants and citizens, democratizing communication previously reserved for nobility, clergy and government officials. The family's rates were precisely calculated. 1 kreuzer per German mile for ordinary letters, with express service available at premium prices, creating predictable revenue streams that funded systematic expansion. Postal profits over 5 centuries funded methodical acquisition. Bavarian forests totaling 80,000 acres, larger than some German principalities. 25 castles controlling strategic routes, banking operations through First Thurn und Taxis Bank, and breweries serving regional markets. The family earned princely rank in 1512 when Maximilian elevated wealthy merchants to hereditary nobility, recognizing their communication network's strategic importance to imperial administration and commercial development. St. Emmeram Palace became their principal seat in 1748 when they acquired a former Benedictine monastery in Regensburg and spent decades transforming it into a complex rivaling Buckingham Palace in scale and splendour. The palace featured architectural evolution across centuries, 8th century Romanesque foundations from the original monastery, Gothic cloisters where monks once prayed, Baroque staterooms added for court ceremonies, and a magnificent Rococo ballroom accommodating 500 dancing aristocrats. Below ground lay crypts containing 29 family members across 3 centuries, their tombs marking generations who'd transformed postal routes into one of Europe's great fortunes through careful management and strategic marriages. Banking through First Thurn und Taxis Bank complemented postal revenues after German unification ended their monopoly, while breweries established in 1812 when they moved to St. Emmeram served Regensburg and generated steady commercial income. The art collections reflected 5 centuries of sophisticated patronage. Medieval altarpieces commissioned for private chapels, Renaissance portraits of family members by court painters, Baroque sculptures adorning palace gardens, and contemporary works marking each generation's cultural moment. Schloss Garatshausen's 40 rooms on Lake Starnberg hosted summer retreats where Bavarian royalty visited, while moated Taxis Castle at Trugenhofen provided a perfectly preserved medieval stronghold, demonstrating the family's ancient roots. Forest holdings reached 80,000 acres by the 20th century, carefully managed through sustainable timber harvests that funded family expenses for generations while preserving hunting grounds for entertaining European royalty. When Otto von Bismarck unified Germany and nationalised postal services in 1867, the family received massive compensation and had already diversified sufficiently through banking, brewing and property to maintain their immense wealth. Prince Johannes inherited this carefully constructed empire upon his father Max Emanuel's death in 1982, commanding assets that contemporary estimates valued between $2 and $3 billion. The bachelor prince lived traditionally at first, collecting art voraciously from international dealers, maintaining forests with scientific precision, hosting elaborate entertainments for European nobility, and fulfilling aristocratic obligations across the continent. By 53, he remained unmarried, despite intense family pressure to produce heirs, rumours of homosexuality competing with simpler explanations of pickiness or excessive devotion to personal pleasure. Dynasty survival required legitimate male heirs under German noble law, making marriage essential regardless of personal preferences, a calculation that would lead to Munich's most unlikely romance. Enter Gloria von Schönburg-Glauchau, impoverished countess serving beer for tips, possessing the youth and lineage Johannes needed to secure his family's future through the next generation. Munich's Nürnberger Bratwurst Glöckl reeked of cigarettes and spilled beer in 1979 as 19-year-old Gloria von Schönburg-Glauchau cleared tables for tourists who never suspected her noble bloodline. Count Joachim von Schönburg-Glauchau had squandered the family fortune through bad investments and expensive habits, leaving his daughter with an aristocratic name worth nothing at the bank, forcing her into service work that her ancestors would have found unthinkable. Prince Johannes entered the smoky tavern for a luncheon, carefully orchestrated by matchmaking friends who suspected the eccentric 53-year-old bachelor might appreciate the Countess's spirited personality and desperate circumstances. 33 years separated them chronologically. She was 19, he was 53. While whispered rumours about Johannes's sexuality added complexity to their unlikely courtship that would transform both their lives. Gloria's poverty made her pragmatic about opportunity. Johannes's need for heirs made him desperate for a suitable young wife. Mutual necessity, creating compatibility, where romance might have failed to flourish naturally. Their engagement shocked aristocratic Europe, but both parties understood the transaction. She would provide heirs and social excitement. He would provide wealth and status beyond her impoverished dreams. Regensburg Cathedral hosted their May 31, 1980 wedding, where Gloria's punk friends from Munich's underground scene mixed uneasily with European royalty in medieval splendour, creating photographs that looked like two different centuries colliding. Overnight transformation followed the ceremony. The beer-serving countess became mistress of St. Emmeram Palace, 500 rooms replacing her cramped Munich apartment, servants replacing her apron, diamonds replacing her costume jewellery. Gloria announced her arrival on the international stage through calculated shock tactics. Hair dyed neon pink one week, bright orange the next, electric blue in asymmetrical cuts that scandalised ladies wearing the same hairstyles for decades. Vivienne Westwood and Jean-Paul Gaultier competed to dress her, creating wardrobes mixing leather jackets with ball gowns, Doc Martens with diamond tiaras worn deliberately backwards, safety pins with sapphires. Fashion magazines struggled to categorise her revolutionary style. Punk princess, aristocratic rebel, or performance artist, using nobility as her canvas for social commentary about ossified European traditions. The couple's parties redefined European entertainment standards. Andy Warhol painting portraits between courses, Mick Jagger singing in the Rococo Ballroom, Keith Haring creating art on palace walls, Michael Jackson moonwalking across parquet floors installed for 18th century minuets. Gloria's 30th birthday celebration in 1990 cost $20 million. The Berlin Philharmonic performed a specially commissioned symphony. Fireworks lit all Bavaria, while Keith Haring created commemorative plates now worth thousands each. Photographs captured surreal juxtapositions that defined the era. 74-year-old Johannes on matching Harley-Davidsons with his pink-haired wife, racing through forests their ancestors had hunted since the Middle Ages. The 1985 hashish arrest at Munich airport cemented her rebel reputation. Customs officials found small amounts leading to fines and global headlines about the drug princess challenging propriety. Johannes defended her with aristocratic insouciance that charmed reporters. She's young, she's experimenting. What do you expect from a girl who grew up in the 1960s? Behind provocation lay dynastic purpose. Gloria delivered 3 heirs in quick succession. Maria Theresia, born 1980, Elizabeth, born 1982, and crucial Prince Albert, born July 1983. Dynastic obligations fulfilled, she amplified her social presence throughout the decade, making St. Emmeram the mandatory address for anyone significant in 1980s, culture, art, fashion or music. Johannes funded every extravagance without question, perhaps compensating for their arrangement's essential oddness through unlimited budgets for fashion, art, entertainment, and her increasingly elaborate social experiments. Harvard Business School graduates had meanwhile infiltrated Johannes's financial circle, convincing him to leverage centuries of conservative family assets into North American commercial real estate at precisely the wrong historical moment. Toronto office towers, purchased at peak prices, and Vancouver shopping centres acquired with borrowed millions, began hemorrhaging value as the 1980s property bubble deflated into catastrophic losses. October 29th brought Johannes's first heart transplant failure at Munich's cardiac clinic, beginning 7 weeks of medical crisis that would end with his death and Gloria's transformation from socialite to survivor. The second transplant attempted weeks later proved equally futile. December 14th found Gloria widowed at 30, with 3 young children and impossible financial burdens that would have crushed experienced businessmen. Creditors presented the devastating bill within days. $500 million borrowed against irreplaceable family assets for North American real estate ventures that had collapsed spectacularly in the late 80s crash. German tax authorities added their inflexible demands. $50 million in estate taxes due within 9 months under rigid inheritance laws, forcing asset sales into the worst possible market conditions. Daily interest charges reached $130,000, nearly $4 million monthly, before touching principal, a financial hemorrhage no fortune could sustain regardless of paper wealth. The estate's theoretical value totaled $1.5 billion, but castles couldn't pay credit card bills, and forests couldn't satisfy bondholders demanding immediate cash payments. Harvard-trained advisors, who'd pushed Johannes into leveraged property speculation throughout the 80s, now offered restructuring plans that would have eliminated family control entirely, transforming the turnout taxis into tenants in their own palace. Toronto's crashing office market had destroyed equity overnight, while Vancouver's retail apocalypse transformed sure thing investments into wealth-destroying black holes consuming millions monthly. Gloria discovered her husband had personally guaranteed corporate loans with family assets, making ancestral properties collateral for failed business ventures in countries the family had never even visited. 25 castles required millions in annual maintenance while producing no revenue, each a monument to prosperity transformed into debt-secured liability threatening foreclosure. The First Turn und Taxis Bank held non-performing loans to other aristocrats caught in similar traps. Breweries needed capital investment to remain competitive. Timber operations carried mortgages against future harvests that might never materialise. St Emmeram alone demanded $3 million annually for utilities and basic maintenance. Costs Gloria couldn't cover, while interest payments devoured every available Deutschmark. The palace heating bill exceeded many families' annual incomes, while keeping 500 rooms, even minimally maintained, required armies of craftsmen the estate could no longer afford. Princess TNT faced choices that would have broken traditional aristocrats raised to preserve rather than liquidate. Which ancestral treasures to sacrifice first, which family traditions to abandon forever. She fired Johannes's entire advisory team within weeks, recognising their Harvard degrees and McKinsey frameworks had helped create the disaster they now professed expertise in solving. Economic textbooks replaced fashion magazines on her bedside table, as private tutors arrived daily to teach the party princess accounting principles, German tax law, and international bankruptcy navigation. Months passed without social appearances. Gloria studied financial statements until midnight, then rose at dawn to manage 3 grieving children while learning spreadsheet software. "I was so tired in the evening," she later recalled to Vanity Fair, describing her transformation from socialite to student, from princess to crisis manager, determined to save her children's inheritance. Spring 1991 brought full comprehension of the catastrophe. Without radical surgery selling treasures accumulated over centuries, the Thurn und Taxis dynasty would vanish into bankruptcy court. Salvation required selling everything markets would purchase while negotiating with German authorities who held the family's future in their inflexible tax demands. Princess Gloria prepared for the greatest aristocratic liquidation since French revolutionaries auctioned Versailles, determined to save something from 5 centuries of accumulation. Sotheby's specialists arrived at St Emmeram like elegant vultures in early 1992, cataloguing treasures accumulated across 5 centuries for the auction block, while Gloria watched family history tagged for sale. Princess Gloria's strategy was surgical precision: sell everything except the irreducible core, St Emmeram Palace as family seat, minimal forest holdings for income, and just enough tangible assets to maintain family identity. 22 castles found new owners within 3 brutal years, medieval fortresses where emperors had slept, and Baroque pleasure palaces built for long-dead princes scattered to international buyers seeking authentic nobility. The November 17, 1992 Geneva auction titled Jewels of the Princes of Thurn und Taxis raised $15 million from tiaras and treasures that had adorned generations of family women. 2 18th-century Order of the Golden Fleece insignias, the Holy Roman Empire's highest chivalric decoration reserved for princes and kings, went under Sotheby's hammer alongside pearl coronets worn at imperial coronations. October 1993 brought auctioneers directly to St Emmeram for 9 days that stripped the palace systematically. 75,000 bottles from wine cellars dating to the 1700s, 400 tables where diplomats had negotiated, 940 chairs that had supported aristocratic posteriors for centuries. The marathon sale totaled 7,600 lots over 9 days, making it the longest English auction house sale of the 20th century, with buyers flying in from every continent. $19.3 million from furniture and wine barely dented the debt mountain, but every million counted toward survival, while palace rooms echoed empty of their contents. Contemporary art bought during their social peak dispersed globally. Keith Haring's custom birthday plate for Gloria, Andy Warhol's complete portrait series, Jeff Koons sculptures, Jean-Michel Basquiat canvases. The entire collection liquidated. The first Thurn und Taxis bank went to competitors who immediately erased family connections dating to the 1800s, ending centuries of financial independence with pen strokes. Canadian office towers and Brazilian properties, the very investments that created the crisis, sold at staggering losses into still-falling markets where buyers knew desperation when they smelled it. Fürstliche Brauerei Thurn und Taxis, brewing excellence since 1812 when the family moved to St Emmeram, Went to Polana in 1996 for undisclosed millions. Every non-essential business faced systematic liquidation. Metallurgical companies acquired during expansion. Surplus timber operations beyond core holdings. Industrial investments Johannes had accumulated. Palace staff shrank from hundreds to essential dozens, while Gloria traded 27 automobiles for 3 practical vehicles, learning bus schedules after selling the private jet fleet. Innovation saved crucial millions. Gloria negotiated unprecedented agreements with Bavarian authorities to donate irreplaceable artworks for $80 million in tax credits, converting heritage into debt relief. The palace opened for public tours in 1995, quickly attracting 300,000 annual visitors whose admission fees would finance the monument they'd come to experience. Corporate events rented the Rococo Ballroom at premium prices. International law firms leased empty palace wings. Society weddings booked the chapel. Every space generating revenue rather than costs. Sustainable forestry certification transformed remaining woodlands into carbon credit producers. Environmental virtue, creating unexpected income streams from air itself. By 1998, the crisis had definitively passed. Debts cleared through asset sales, taxes satisfied through artwork donations, core properties preserved through Gloria's determination. Prince Albert inherited stabilised holdings when he assumed control in 2001 at age 18. Palace secure, forests sustainable, fortune reduced from billions to hundreds of millions, but real rather than leveraged fantasy. Harvard Business School immortalised Princess Gloria as case study 225-038, titled Citizens of the World, the International Legacy of Gloria von Thurn und Taxis, analysing her crisis management as a template. The beer hall countess had saved a 5-century dynasty through unsentimental asset liquidation, combined with innovative revenue generation, proving that survival sometimes requires destroying the past to preserve the future. Princess TNT's greatest explosion cleared away accumulated excess, leaving a leaner but sustainable fortune for the 21st century, her transformation from party princess to financial warrior complete. And now we'd like to see you in the comments. Without revealing your age, of course, do you remember the peak era of Princess TNT? We look forward to hearing your experiences below, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Allure. Cheers.